Welcome back to another episode of Overanalyzing VTubers. Today, we'll be going on an irrational sleep deprivation-induced rant about Mori Calliope's song, non-fiction. But, Shiryu, I thought you were taking a hiatus because of college. Yes, that is correct, but that wasn't until I discovered an ancient secret technique called failing. Anyways, non-fiction is one of the Hololive songs ever. On top of having nut-busting graphics and being a solid A-tier bop, it does what the VTuber genre does best. Blur the line between realities, and I guess I'm gonna spend the next 9 minutes talking about this. I'll start with the title of the song, Non-Fiction. The title has several different meanings and interpretations. The most basic interpretation of this title draws from the group's name, Holomyth, a clever instance of wordplay contrasting the fictional characters of legend with their self-proclaimed non-fiction. The context of this title suggests the process of fantasy coming to our reality, in a similar vein to how these myths are now live streamers and cementing themselves as objective truth. The song Non-Fiction can thus be seen as the realization of a weeb's wet dream, having their waifu finally become real, because, let's face it, this is essentially Yago's master plan. But let's put a pin on that. I'll come back to that later. So, non-fiction is the story of how these fantasy characters came to be real? There's a lot of reason to suggest that. The opening verse,
Once upon a time is not where our myth belongs,
can be interpreted as Holomyth's story isn't in the realm of fiction. This is a bit meta since we as viewers are technically outside the Holoverse, so it's fake regardless. But if we set suspension of disbelief to 0, then the song opens with the invitation to explore the reality of this so-called myth. But I digress. The rest of the intro goes as follows.
to the faded lines of words and rhyme is a hidden song. Though fractured, deeply worn by sorrows from time and time again, take my hand and enter our pretend.
We find out that the story of Holomyth is an epic passed down through time, eventually eroding the hardships of the quintet into far-flung tales, and now we are being invited to uncover the truth. How do we know this? Well, put on your tinfoil hats because we're going to be taking a look at Greek mythology. No one? Myth? Countless similarities connect non-fiction with something like that of the Iliad. We have faded lines passed down through time, as Grecian epics often were. The rhymes, symbolic of dialectic hexameter, and deeply fractured, referencing the lost works of the Adventures During the Trojan War series by Homer. What non-fiction essentially does is give a first-person account of the events that led up to Holomyth, much like if Oedipus gave a first-person account of the events that led up to him banging his mom. Of course, this interpretation is surface level, and I know my 11th grade English teacher would be livid if she caught me lacking with this analysis. Thus, instead of interpreting non-fiction from within the Holoverse, what if we take a look from the outside? Non-fiction could be non-fiction because it was a true story to begin with. Maybe the story of Holomyth isn't a once upon a time because it took place quite recently. What if, instead of being a grand lore reveal, it's a subtle nod to the beginning of Hololive English? While we, the viewers, sit behind the screen, watching these cute anime girls play make-believe, on the other end of the screen reveals a more pressing truth. So, let's take up the offer, enter their pretend, and uncover the reality hidden within Wonderland. Before I begin cracking the code that non-fiction presents, let's summarize each of the song paragraphs. Stanzas? Verses? I don't really know what they're called. The block things in music that are separated. This way, it's easier to digest as a whole. As previously mentioned, verse 1 is an invitation to learn more about the myth. The refrain, as it's called apparently, describes the birth of a counterculture that defies society's expectations to, quote, behave, unquote, but rather encourages those to be brave. Though it's not specified how the counterculture is expected to be brave, we can reasonably assume it's by drinking sparkling water, driving a Bugatti of an unspecified color, and getting arrested because of a pizza box. Slowly yet slowly, this counterculture grows, inviting those along, specifically, quote, lost souls gone astray, unquote. The message of the chorus is particularly meaningful for the overall song. It's the need to be heard, the restless and relentless screams of an unnoticed passion refusing to be extinguished. Though many think the path is easy, one where love prevails, the reality is painful and uncertain. only the truly willing will ignite and come alive. In verse 2, these characters become aware of the possibility of fading into obscurity and never having their dreams realized. Ending on a hopeful note, the Voices 5 know that if they follow their passion and follow their heart, they can never lose their way. I'm gonna put yet another pin on the bridge, but does any of this sound familiar? Well, it should. It's the story of how I wailed countless dollars rolling cops. It's the story of Hololive, and looking back on it, it's just a really meta autobiography. When the refrain mentions how a counterculture is being formed, it's actually just Yago in a board meeting birthing Hololive English from his mind vagina. In a time where Niji Sanji India, or the original Niji Sanji English, was failing to collect a Western audience, there was no guarantee of the success of yet another English branch. Holomyth's creation essentially countered all pre-existing notions and said, "Nah, fuck it, we ball," before balling all over everyone. Truly, one of the VTuber moments ever. Contrasting the majority male flesh and blood streamers of the Yan scene, Hololive's Moldbreaker broke the mold and invited millions along for an unprecedented journey. Starting at his Tokinosaurus distant dream, Hololive has endured many hardships to get where it is today. It was a passion project, a desperate shout of a young woman who's thirsting so hard to become a marketable plushie, who became the spark and leapt headfirst into the dark. Okay, I swear I'll stop coding eventually. And although numbers weren't on her side in the beginning, she had no doubts on eventual success, or according to this first at least, assuming the extended metaphor is on point. From an outside perspective, it can appear that Hololive admission, for lack of better words, is a ticket to instant success and fame, though it's much like the struggle grind shine of a real nerd, as opposed to a fairy tale where love prevails. As it is common with many passion projects, the road to success was never set in stone. In fact, the many doubts and uncertainties are represented in the verse.
Once upon a time is not where a voice gets heard.
Which reinforces the idea that
there is no Easter Bunny, there is no Tooth Fairy, and there is no
Once upon a time.
There was always the persistent fear that passion would eventually lose to time, and the dream would fail to fly. The Voices 5, which you can obviously guess are Mori, Kira, Watson, Ina, and Kiara respectively, were lucky enough to have fought back and break this cynical cycle. In the end, they followed their way and brought the world of Hollow Yen to life. Remember the pin I put on the bridge earlier? Yup, it's time to talk about that, and how beautiful of a segue it is from verse 2. I'm sure you're like, oh, they each get their own line, and that's very poetic and shit because they're a group and the song is about them and stuff. No, amateur analysis, get the fuck on out of here. You see, each line can be cross-referenced to some meaningful event in each talent's journey. Mori's line finds its roots in Mori's End of a Life, where she references her somber past and persistence to produce underground music. Kiara's line is potentially a reference to an earlier time in Hololive history when she was lagging behind all the other girls, yet pushed past the quote, burning embers, unquote, to earn a dedicated fan base.
I do have to say, being the last one to reach it, again, makes me doubt myself.
Ina's line is kind of obvious because she's considered the most comfy. Next, Kira sings, which is another freeball because A, sharks live in oceans, B, look at those numbers, that's a BBC right there, a big boy subcount, and finally, C, Kira is the most notable pioneer in taking VTubers from a niche interest to an international topic. Finally, Ame has which I can't really figure out. I mean, setting things into motion as the last member of Myth. Also, clocks have gears and she time travels with clocks? I don't really know. I like parallelism, but I can't dig my way out of this one. Non-fiction ends with Mori singing.
Smile side by side among the stars.
Not because Holomyth has been immortalized in the constellations, but they have been immortalized by the audience. Throughout the song, stars have been mentioned over and over again, showing how the audience has always been there. It's only under the watchful gaze of the myriad lights that Hololive has been able to grow to such an astounding size. Non-fiction is not the story of lore, it's the story of a dream, specifically Hololive English. drawing from the stories of legend and through force of will and determination, making them reality. Remember my pin earlier on Yaku's dream to make anime waifus real? These characters, these stories, were always real. They were non-fiction from the beginning. Through hardship and persistence, Yaku's dream is realized to what we see now on stage. The real anime waifus, though, were the friends that we've made along the way. And to the fans who have supported the work of Hololive Production, you are the stars that light up the sky, that guide the talents to... I can't do this. This is too cheesy, even for me. In conclusion, give non-fiction a listen. It's good. I'm tired. Please forgive me for the lack of existing, and Miss Bush, if you're up there. I hope you're proud of this analysis. Later. Hello, I've finished recording, and by that I mean leave for half a year. And I've realized that some rando in the comment section literally gave a brief version of what I spent 10 minutes explaining. So, Kalki, I don't know who you are, but apologies, and please stop stalking me. Thank you.